Hello, my name is Zayib Fleming, and this is Living the Max Life 365. Today our show is Epidemic Addiction with our special guest, Pastor Jesus Anthony Rodriguez. Over 20 million Americans over the age of 12 have an addiction. That does not include those who use tobacco. 100 people die every day from drug overdoses. This rate has tripled in the past 20 years. Over 5 million emergency room visits in 2011 were drug-related. 2.6 million people with addictions have a dependence on both alcohol and illicit drugs. 9.4 million people in 2011 reported driving under the influence of illicit drugs. 6.8 million people with an addiction have a mental illness. Rates of illicit drug use is the highest among these aged 18 to 25. Over 90% of those with an addiction began drinking, smoking, or using illicit drugs before the age of 18. Addiction is defined as the fact or condition of being addicted to a particular substance, behavior, thing, or activity. Persistent compulsive use of a substance known by the user to be harmful. While this show may talk about addiction using chemical substances, we know that addiction can take many different forms, including behavior, as well as things or activities such as social media. We are living in a time that addiction is truly an epidemic. I want to explore this a little bit more about addiction because I know since we did the last taping, you had a lot of people give you a call and say, look, I need help in this area. And they reached out to you and say, I love your story, I love your testimony, but I'm in the same place that you've been. So share with us some of the results from the last taping that we did.
First of all, I want to thank all you guys who are watching us on YouTube and Pastor Ayub as well for taking his time out and doing this. It's really important. Last time we got together and we spoke about my journey in life, I got a lot of feedback, especially from people who knew me way back when. It was surprising that people 20, 25, 15 years ago are reaching out to me, especially the ones who knew me during my addiction and people who didn't know that I struggled with addiction at all. So it was a very positive outcome, getting a lot of phone calls, emails, people are messaging me, inboxing me and asking me for prayers. They saying that the testimony has really impacted their lives. It's encouraged them, it's inspired them. Because not a lot of people are willing to tell the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. It's like being exposed. You know, there's nothing left to say but now share the story and show people in order for you to continue to move forward in life, you need to accept what you've done. And I think, through the videos and through us getting together and speaking about this, it also helps me maintain my recovery, because in order for me to keep my recovery, I have to give it back. Mm-hmm. I have to give it back. So this is an avenue, to maintain and keep my recovery, but also to open doors for other people to get help.
That's a powerful point. We're going to put up a graphic on something I call the matrix of addiction. And one of the points is that after you have some type of trauma or experience, you have to decide what that meaning is, and whether it was pleasurable or painful. If it's painful, you of course stay away from it. If it's pleasurable, you want to repeat it. And then you start to associate with what caused the pain. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that causes the addiction, because some people actually get stronger when they come through a traumatic situation. You look at people who've been through the military and maybe have lost a limb, but they decided that wasn't going to decide the quality of their life. So through strength of will, through strength of character, and coming up with a plan, they got prosthetics, they entered some type of a program, and so they built a life that went beyond the trauma, and so it didn't define them. On the other side, people can become isolated, away from the community who loves them, their family, people trying to help them, and can become isolated almost in their shame, not knowing how to process the pain. And so I think the difficult thing, what you just said, is when you become isolated, you start falling to a community because you need people around you sometimes who are doing the same things that you're doing. And they're hurting the way you hurt. Absolutely. And even though you can't be with your family and things because you're ashamed of what you're doing and you're not quite taking responsibility for it, you fall into a community that is like you, in a bad place sometimes. They could be homeless, they could be stealing, they could be engaging in risky behavior, but you're still isolated from the community that's going to help you. Was that a part of your story?
Hold on, absolutely. I mean, addiction is, I think it goes beyond what many people even understand or the way it's described. You know, it's a compulsive, unhealthy behavior, but we're creatures of habit. And based on your trauma, based on your pain, or based on how you process pleasure, you know, I've learned that it was easier for me to bond to a group of people or to a community that was going through what I went through, and the way they handled it, their outlet was getting high, no matter what drug it was. So I was more accepted by the people that were getting high. You know, it became the norm, like we spoke about before. And you do isolate yourself because a normal person will bond to the people that he loves and that loves them, and will go live their life, their everyday life, you know, facing fear, overcoming fear and their obstacles. But a person who isolates themselves, you know, has to deal with fear. You know, they're driven by their emotions. So now, you know, fear moves them, and loneliness and anger and bitterness. So it becomes a little easier to deal with these emotions or reality, you know, by getting high, by using you know, a chemical substance or alcohol.
Mm-hmm. Now, what does that community look like at its worst? Because a lot of people on the other side of addiction, their family, they don't always understand, why is this person doing this, and how come I can't reach them? Why are they not rational? Why are they not logical? Why would they spend all this money and put drugs and alcohol into their bodies and literally risk everything? So what would be your message to the other side of people who are trying to pull someone out of addiction? What would be your message to them? Is it just a matter of being patient and being firm when you really don't understand what that other side in that community looks like that is now supporting them?
Well, let me start by saying that nobody grows up saying, I want to be a crackhead. You know, nobody grows up saying, I want to stick a needle in my arm or pop pills. You know, you just don't grow up saying that. You know, we have dreams. Mm-hmm. You know, we have aspirations, and somewhere along the line, we become detoured. You know, and it's easier, you know, for the addict after a certain amount of time to become really manipulative and use their pain and their trauma and all their experiences as an excuse. And one of my excuses was, you know, you don't understand what I'm going through.
Yes.
You understand? Yes. So I think...
And to a degree they don't.
They don't.
Yeah.
They don't, you know, because people need to understand the disease concept of addiction. It's primary. Before I want to do anything or be with my family or hang out with anybody, I want to get high, you know, or I wanted to get high. So it's primary, it's progressive, chronic, and fatal if left untreated. That's why we have so many overdoses, because it's being left untreated. It's to a point where of no return. So for the families that, you know, are struggling with a family member who is addicted, there is some moment, believe it or not, of clarity for that person where the addict says, I'm tired of this. I don't want to do it no more. And that's the opportunity. You know, when somebody asks for help, that's the moment you need to help them. Because they might just want help, and 5 minutes later they're in Home Depot stealing a whole bunch of circular saws or running to the pawn shop or in your purse.
Or stealing metal off the back of trucks.
Yeah, copper or whatever. So, you know, the addict, when he cries out for help, needs to be helped. And
there was a study in Portugal, because Portugal at one point was not having any more success than we were with treating addiction. And they looked at it from a standpoint of isolation from the community that's trying to help them. And they looked at it, instead of punishment in jail, let's get them more case management to help them through the process. And let's try to get them in jobs and assimilate them back into society. There's a thin line there, because I've dealt with a lot of people whose children are suffering from addiction. And their sense of reality, and we'll talk about that in a minute, as far as cognitive dissonance is, or mixed neural associations, they can't think clearly. They don't process clearly. Their sense of right and wrong and values and stuff gets very skewed. So I can understand the parents or the family having to be strong and saying, we want to help you. But in this program in Portugal, they really focused them in keeping them assimilated back into society, so they took away the isolation. And when they did that, they saw a 50% rate of being able to stop addiction by getting people to assimilate when they said, hey, I don't want to do this anymore. Because that's the point that they're willing to accept some responsibility for the addiction. They may not have caused the trauma that they went through, but all of us still have to accept responsibility for our life and the condition of our lives.
We see that there was an epidemic at that time that, people rose up to talk about, and they treated it as a disease. So they rose the awareness, they spoke to the community, and now healthcare got involved and started, releasing funds to treat this disease. And I think the way we need to go about it today is the same way, because addiction is a disease. It's a disease, it's a disease because the dopamine hijacks your mind, and these people right now aren't in a state of mind where they can use their intellect. They can't rationalize because they're living in a state of, beyond euphoria. Mm-hmm. It's just driven by emotion, anger, fear, resentment, hate. And then after a while, we're creatures of habits. This habit becomes a lifestyle, and it's hard to break because we become so isolated. It's not good for man to be alone. We're supposed to fellowship. We're supposed to bond with each other. So you have two different communities. You have what we call normal people, and then you have what people have labeled as junkies, drug addicts, and bums. But these are people, who are struggling with an addiction, with a disease, and they need treatment. And by God's grace, I got that treatment. I didn't slip through the cracks, nothing against other programs, but I wasn't given a bed for a week to try to kick, a habit and put back out on the street without any treatment. I was able to go to a wonderful facility out in Daytona Beach called the Reality House. Director, Mr. Williams and Ms. Gale. And they really treated not the underlying cause of addiction. They focused on the recovery part of addiction. So one of my first things was I had to go through a moral recognition treatment. It's called MRT, where I really had to tap into, the little boy in me. You understand? I had to find out what happened while I was growing up that caused this trauma, but then realize what's more important to me now. Where along the line did I get stuck on? Because for me, it was normal to see somebody smoke a cigarette and drink. After a while, it was so happened so much in my house that it was the normal to see somebody sniffing some powder. It was normal for me to see my family smoking a joint. So, even though it wasn't accepted by my dad, but he accepted the behavior. And that behavior is something that we need to begin to address. So I think, that moral recognition of getting my ego out of the way, the me out of the way, dealing with my habit self, and start to deal with, who I truly am, helped me a lot. So, talking about the treatment, this is the type of treatment that I received to help me understand, who I am, whose I am, and that I serve a greater purpose. That the lifestyle that I was living, it wasn't normal. It wasn't right. They say it takes you 21 to 30 days to break a habit or to develop a new habit. But when you're chemical dependent, it takes anywhere from 18 to 24 months for your body to go back into balance. See, people don't know these things. So now they take you out of isolation. They put you back into society, put you back to work, start making you use your brain, start making you reflect, start making you think, start making you write down and work in a journal. And you start realizing, wow, some of the things I've done is crazy and I can't believe it. But then they surround you with people who are struggling the same way you are. And there's some people who had it worse than you did. Or then you start saying, man, I wasn't as bad as he was.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, we were all in the same boat. We were stuck. We were addicts, And I thank God for that treatment, because it opened my eyes to realize that I'm worth something. My self-worth, So I think the main thing that blessed me was that I got this help, when I really wanted it. I wanted it. It has to be a two-way street. You have to want it, and when you have that opportunity, take it. You have to take the opportunity, and I did. So it blessed my life tremendously.
This time I want to spend a little time talking with Pastor Anthony about the conscious mind and subconscious mind. A lot of his therapy that he went through for recovery was not physical therapy as far as drugs. It was more cognitive therapy, so I want to talk about that for a minute. So we talked about mixed neuroassociations, or cognitive dissonance, where a person really is unclear in their thoughts, and they can have a mixed neuroassociation, meaning like this cup can have two completely different meanings. And depending on what emotional state I'm in, or a hyper state of emotions, depends on what's going to influence my decisions. So like you said, you can be lucid at 1 minute and have clear thoughts and think, wow, I don't want to do this anymore. I have a community of family and friends and structure, and I have reasons why and purpose that makes more sense for me to go back. But it also means that I can't avoid the trauma and some of the things that have me here in the first place. If I stay here and don't recover, I'm isolated. I can cope by using drugs, alcohol. But the other part about the addiction is not just the drugs that release the dopamine and other endorphins in the brain that simulate drugs in the first place and allow you to avoid the pain and increase a pleasure sensation. And that's the other reason why it's hard to kick an addiction. So please share with us the other side of getting high when you're not getting high.
Oh, man. Well, I'm just going to give it to you raw and uncut.
Yes, sir.
The truth of the matter is, I think the greatest part of the high is not actually, getting high with the drug. It's how you go about getting it. I think for me, thinking of the master plan of how I'm gonna get the money or the drug was the greatest part of the high. And then the climax of that high was executing that plan. So I can sit down and have a whole bunch of drugs in front of me, but when I get to a certain point, my mind is already saying, I need more drugs. How am I gonna get more drugs? Who am I gonna get the drugs from? And how am I gonna go about it? So you come up with these schemes, you come up with these stories, and they become so vivid, so real that you act them out. See, addiction is an unhealthy, compulsive behavior that we act out.
Yes.
And we do that mainly to avoid the pain.
Yes.
To deal with whatever trauma you went through. So for me, in order to maintain the high, the greater high was making it happen. Anywhere from, robbery to burglary to manipulation. I would take advantage of people's trust, people that, believed in me and trusted me. Borrowing money, I call it the borrowing for Peter to pay Paul syndrome. I fell into that trap. And then, stealing from family, because it's the easiest.
Mm-hmm.
You know they're always going to open their doors, and the ones who close their doors, okay, somewhere along the line down the road,
Yes.
they're going to forgive you. But it's not expected. Who expected Anthony? The pastor. The kung fu teacher. This is such a good boy raised in church. This guy who was loved and appreciated and looked up to. To become, what I despise the most.
Mm-hmm. But a lot of people didn't understand the trauma. It's easy to judge us from what we think you are, as well as what roles we want you to play. One thing about a tribe staying together and being a tribe, somebody's got to be a chief, but there's got to be a lot of Indians,
Right.
and the Indians all have a role to play.
Right.
So when people have their expectations, the roles they want you to play, when the apple cart is upset for good or for bad, it's traumatic to the whole tribe.
Right.
If you were, if people around you expected very little of you, and you reverse and say, I'm going to be great at something, and you train and you study and you work hard, you go out there and be great at it, it can be as traumatic to the tribe as if you fail.
Right.
Because you're still not playing the role that somebody else expects of you.
It's funny because I play both sides.
Mm-hmm.
I said one time during an interview one time that I've succeeded greatly and I failed greatly. A young, upcoming pastor in the community, we had a thriving church, but yet I had to deal with religion and being a liberal.
Mm-hmm.
Being a young businessman who knew how to make money and how to work hard, and being a builder, I didn't know how money worked. I didn't understand, the value of a dollar. I didn't know how, to make my money multiply,
Mm-hmm.
to duplicate itself. I didn't know that. I didn't save for a rainy day because you never think it can happen to you. So when I come to that point in my life where people look up to you, I fell into the trap of pleasing people. And that's something I struggle, I think even sometimes today with, is pleasing people. And you compromise yourself with so many people, you dilute yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and you're effective to nobody. You're of no avail, so I can't help you the way I want to and I should, because I'm all over the place.
Oh, sure.
Because I never learned how to say no, even to drugs.
I think a lot more people are addicted, if not to drugs or alcohol, to even behavior patterns, even addicted to roles that they have to play. And a lot of people that I have, and I'll use the word loosely, counseled, coached, or whatever over time, one thing that's always clear is they're not being authentic to themselves, number one. And a lot of times in their family structure, friend structure, work, they're not even in the conversation. It's almost like they don't exist.
Right.
It's like somebody walks up to them and everybody who knows them puts a sticky note on them. I need you to be this.
Yes.
I need you to be my mother.
Yes.
Somebody's another sticky note, I need you to be my wife. Another sticky note, I need you to be my, Uber driver and take me to soccer practice, on and on and on. So they walk around with all these sticky notes of how other people have defined them and what they need.
Absolutely.
But none of them are written by themselves.
Right.
And so there's no sense of identity. See, for me, and a lot of people may disagree with it, and that's fine, I believe that the ego has to be healthy.
It has to.
Has to be healthy. And only at the level of servant leadership do you actually give that up.
Right.
And say, now I'm going to sacrifice myself for the greater good. But prior to that, you have to have a healthy ego that is well defined, because you have to know who you are.
Absolutely.
Who you are authentically, what you can and cannot do. And until you really push yourself and push yourself hard and do what's right for yourself,
Right.
you'll never know what you're capable of until you're tested. Until you say one more rep, one more transformative rep,
Yeah.
to do one more than I thought I could do, you'll never know how far you can grow.
No.
That is a healthy ego.
Yeah.
It's only until your ego is strong and healthy, and I'm not saying narcissism, till no one else exists, but you continue to compromise yourself and put yourself last in the conversation, trust me, you'll never be what you can be to the people around you, your kids, your your wife or your husband, your community. You'll never be what you could be, what you were designed, what you were created to be. You'll never know those strengths until you purpose it. I'm going to do what's right by me some of the time.
Absolutely.
So some of those sticky notes have to have your writing on it, to how you define yourself, because without that, you're lost.
It's funny you say that, because I lived a long time like that, being defined as a pastor, as a barber, as a life coach, as a husband. When you're in the ministry, you're everything. You're the dad to the fatherless. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
You're the
and a lot
doctor.
of times you're what the council or somebody else, or
When I need
the
counseling.
board or whatever, you're what they want you to be.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you're called to minister in your brokenness.
And we want to talk about how much manipulation is in ministry.
It's
that's a discussion
huge
for another time.
It's huge, because one of the things people say is, Pastor, you have to do this. Or, the Bible says, and they use the word, to manipulate and get what they want. This is your calling. This is what God is calling you to do. But I learned over time, listen, the same God you love and you pray to, if he spoke to you, he definitely has to speak to me and give me peace about it. So now, I'm not easily moved as I was before, especially going through my transition and being incarcerated, because I spent so much time alone with him.
Yes.
That I learned to hear his voice. I learned to be still and not to be driven by my emotions. When you're in a cell and you're doing time and you're scared and you're lonely, what are you going to do? Who else am I going to call if not you, God? Who else can I talk to in the middle of the night when I miss my wife and I miss my son?
Absolutely.
So my wife used to say, you give everybody the best of you and you leave me the crumbs. I remember one time I took somebody's truck to wash, to the car wash, and I'm detailing this car, fully detailed. I'm shampooing the rugs, and I look over and I see my wife and I crying. And I was like, what's wrong with you? She's like, I can't believe you're doing what you're doing, and look at my car.
Yeah.
And it blew my mind that my car needed to be vacuumed, washed, and the rugs needed to be taken care of. And I need to do this to show my wife, listen, I value what we have, and I appreciate you.
Yes.
And I love you, and I want you to drive in a clean vehicle. I want you to feel good. But here I am, putting my family again on the back burner. And I'm over here fully detailing somebody else's car. So it just opened my mind to see how messed up, I was, because it becomes a wrong pattern of behavior. We grow up with wrong thinking patterns, wrong attitudes, wrong teachings, especially in religion.
Absolutely.
Wrong behaviors, and we start to agree and accept, this lifestyle, and what happens is we begin to build these strongholds in our hearts. So now when somebody wants to deal with the issue or tell you that you're wrong, first thing you do is get into defense mode and you push them away. So the biggest thing any addict has to deal with is accepting he's wrong and saying, listen, this ain't right. This is not right. The way I'm living, what I'm doing, how I'm going about it, it's affecting everybody around me. It's a ripple effect. So I had to chip away at that stronghold one day at a time, because I was broken. And it was there in that brokenness where, people would say, take the taste out of my mouth, or take this. It was there in that brokenness that I couldn't believe that I did half of the things I did in my addiction. During my addiction, I was horrible. They tell me stories, and I'm like, I couldn't do that. That wasn't me. You tell me, hey, I remember this. And I'm like, not me. I would never do that. You were like, yeah, you did that. Nah, you got the wrong guy. Why? Because it was such a stronghold in me that I believed it. With every ounce of my body, nobody could tell me any different. And that's how I lived.
Let's unpack that for a minute, because I don't want people to watch this and not understanding what's the other side of when we use words like stronghold and words that may be more applicable to a church situation to one that's not. The way that your mind works, you have your conscious mind, your frontal lobe, and you have your subconscious mind, which makes up the most of your brain. Your subconscious mind stores and filters information constantly, 24 hours. It never stops. And it's your conscious or creative mind that allows you to think through problems and create solutions. But it's the mind that lives in the right now.
Right now, that's right.
But your subconscious mind is the part of the mind with what's called the RAS, reticular activation system, that allows you to breathe, sleep, drive without thinking. It is the part that is conditioned and allows a lot of our lives to be programmed so that we can be conscious to listening to music or singing, but driving somewhere, braking, stopping, turn signals, all these operations we're completely not consciously thinking about.
Right.
So we have neuro associations when all that information starts. It's kind of like a big web, if you can see it that way, of all these files and stuff of information. But when you have a traumatic situation, the mind has to give it meaning, and it starts to have to ask questions: is it true? And then the questions have to be proven through circumstances. That's one of the reasons why we keep repeating behavior, is to prove that what we believe is wrong, because it gives us certainty. Right? So we have to have a certain amount of certainty in life and a certain amount of uncertainty so that we can grow and continue to be creative. So the person who is an addict starts to build neural associations of the behavior and thought patterns long before they start acting out on them, and they go unchallenged. If I call you stupid long enough, after a while, stupid is imprinted in your brain. And the question asks, are you stupid?
Right.
And your mind goes to seek that you're stupid, that you can't learn, that you can't get it right. Whatever the case is that somebody else define you, your mind asks, is that true? And if it seeks to prove that it's true unchallenged, it will prove that it's true.
Absolutely.
So the other reason that the addict is hard to change is because he's conditioned to think that way long before he actually starts using drugs. Because that information plays like on a loop. And if unchallenged, it becomes truth. His truth.
It becomes habit self.
Absolutely. So those habits are, and then you add dopamine and endorphins and all this other kind of stuff. And then the community now, and the same thing is true with gangs and so many other activities, that this is true, is easier to embrace as a lifestyle. And so on top of physical therapy, on top of cognitive therapy, the truth is we have to renew our minds. And there's no other way to do that other than repetitious learning.
Absolutely.
And when we recognize the thought patterns and our emotions and anger, being hyper emotional about anything, we have to stop and say, where's that coming from? And we have to challenge that. And we have to consciously imprint something else instead of that in order for our minds now to start create new neural associations in the mind. And kind of what your message would be, those who have been isolated and in a place where their thoughts aren't clear. Sooner or later they're going to come to a lucid thought, and they're going to look at what's possible in their former life and their present life, or the life that they see other people having that they may want themselves, and they're going to say, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to get out of this. And before they relapse back into that same behavior that's been driven by the addiction, what would be your message to them?
Come out from amongst them. And when you come out from amongst them, you need to start renewing your mind and conditioning yourself. This is for people who really do want to stop getting high. For people who do want to live a normal lifestyle. You know, when they used to talk about the addict and normal people, it bothered me. But then I started to realize, now that I'm sober-minded, that when I was in my addiction, man, it wasn't normal. Nothing during my addiction was normal. It wasn't right. But you have to put the work in. You have to want to stop. You have to want to put the work in. You have to seek help. You can't let your pride get in your way. Stop denying and justifying your behavior. You know, you're out of control. Your life is spiraling down. You overdose several times. You find yourself living in a car, living in the streets, sleeping in a crack house. I mean, come out from amongst them. You know, some people they're surrounded, by, this epidemic, and it's hard to get out. But if you want to, you can get out, no matter how hard you need to try. if you were stuck in a pit and you knew that there was only one way out of that pit and you were bound, you would drag yourself on your face, on your knees, on your elbows, and you would crawl to wherever you have to go to get out of that position, out of that darkness, out of that life or death situation. It's the same thing now. You have to put in the work. You have to be willing to separate yourself. You have to be willing, for some people they need to relocate. Some people just really need to get plugged in. To
and not stay isolated.
Yeah, into a support group. AA for those who are alcoholics. NA. Celebrate Recovery. A 12-step Christian program. There's so many avenues you can take, but you have to want it. You really have to want it, and I wanted it so bad because everything I was promised, through His Word, I begin to believe. You have to believe. You have to believe in yourself. You have to want to be free indeed. I just wanted to be liberated. I didn't want to wake up anymore seeing my wife cry. I didn't want to walk around looking over my shoulders. I didn't want to be hungry when I had a home to go to eat. I didn't want to wake up on somebody's couch and say, what the heck happened? Wake up in somebody's house, don't even know how I get there. I just didn't want to live like that no more. I've had family members and friends who, they said they would die for the drugs. I don't want to die, man. I want to live.
Yeah. We've all lost friends to the drugs. I remember losing some people who were very close to me from heroin. A good friend of mine, Sydney, and other people found dead on the bathroom floor with a needle stuck in their arms. Yeah. And this was a guy who was in the ministry at the time. My message to anybody out there, when you have that lucid moment, that moment when you come to yourself, like the prodigal son, and at his worst, and say, man, even in my father's house, the servants eat better than this.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, so I would say this: freedom is available. And what freedom looks like is, like you said, not looking over your shoulder, but it's also being able to really look at your life, whatever you have left of it, and say, it's mine. And I can create whatever I want to out of it, something for the positive. I don't have to let my life pass by and be destroyed by addiction, drugs, alcohol, prison. I don't have to suffer rape and all other things that come along with that lifestyle when people take advantage of you and manipulate you because you're unprotected and you have to do what you have to do to stay in that community. You can change, and though there are not enough programs, there's enough program for you.
Absolutely.
When you decide to get out and move forward and say, I want to accept complete responsibility. I didn't cause the trauma, right?
Yeah.
But I can fix this.
Absolutely.
And there's nobody else who can. As a kid, going through different things and trying to find my way, I realized at some point that the cavalry ain't coming.
No, man.
I used to love to watch the Cowboys and Indians, and every time the Cowboys were in trouble, you hear that bugle call, and you see that flag coming over and then here come the blue coats, and the Indians take off running, and the cavalry saved the day. But I realized the cavalry's not coming.
No, you need to accept responsibility.
Complete responsibility.
And I think that's why we're able to work with each other.
Yeah.
Because
and I think when you do, I think God makes a way. I Have Remembered Love by Ayub Fleming. Excerpt from Winds of Change. The road home is long, but the pain left behind is a haunting memory, calling me back, holding me. I pass by men who I know not, but shared my life with, dying. Don't call to me on my way. I am dead walking, toward a distant hope. Calling back the past, still my future. I am going home, back to the place of my birth, but my rights I've lost. Squandered all that you gave so freely in my bondage haste. Let me find a place of rest next to the servants in my Father's house. The stables seem glorious in my sin. Be not angry, Father, I pray thee. The pigs did eat the ring you gave me. Let me lie with the dogs for morsel. I will crouch low, work, and not sleep. Let me return home and find my way. Why do you honor me with this robe? What manner of love slew this calf? Don't be angry, my brother, for my return. Speak slowly to our Father and make low thy heart. I made my bed in hell, but I remembered love. I want to thank you today for tuning into this special program with Pastor Jesus Anthony Rodriguez and myself, and I hope this inspired you to change as much as it inspired us to make it. I have a special book offer today. It's a book I wrote some years ago, and it's a book that's very close to my heart because the story is based on Luke 15, commonly known as the prodigal son. The book is called I Have Remembered Love, and it's not just the story of the prodigal son coming to himself and going home. It's the prodigal son remembering that he had a father who loved him. Many of us, because of sin and because of addiction, move into an area of isolation where we feel alone and unloved. But most of the time, nothing could be further from the truth. As I remind people when they face certain situations, I ask them, if you made that tough decision, do you realize there's somebody in your life who will still love you? And when they remember that, that empowers them to move ahead and make the decisions, knowing that it may be tough, it may not be easy, but at the end of the day, somebody's still going to love them, somebody's still going to belong to them, somebody's going to still care for them, and sooner or later, they will understand why you had to make that tough decision. If you could, please go out and get that book today. It's on Amazon.com, BarnesandNobles.com. It's I Have Remembered Love. And I think you will find it inspirational not only for yourself, but it makes a great gift for those who either may be in addiction or may be in a tough place, because they need to also remember that God loves them as well.